Hey everyone, and welcome back. We're diving into a topic today that might not be on everyone's radar, but it's definitely something that could give you an edge if you're prepping for the UPSC exams, especially the mains.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those sneaky topics that connects so many different areas, Indian polity, the judiciary, even current affairs.
Right, exactly. And you know what else that reason? The details of this whole process could totally show up as a prelims question too. So we're going to break it all down today using a super helpful article from Live Law as our guide. So make sure you have your notebooks ready because we're going deep on ad hoc judges in India.
It's a pretty fascinating concept when you think about it. It's like imagine a legal system so overloaded that it has to call back retired judges to help clear the backlog. That's essentially what India is considering, and we're going to unpack the why and the how of it all.
Okay, so let's start with the why. Why is India even thinking about bringing back retired judges?
Well, the simple answer is that Indian high courts are facing a massive backlog of cases.
We're talking like a few thousand cases, right?
Way more than that. We're talking over 40% vacancies in judgeships across high courts.
Wow, 40%. That's huge.
It is. And it's not just a number. It means real people are waiting years, sometimes even decades, for justice.
So it's like a massive traffic jam in the legal system.
Exactly. And that's where Article 224A of the Indian Constitution comes into play.
Article 224A. What's that all about?
Well, it's this rarely used provision that allows for the appointment of retired judges on what's called an ad hoc basis.
So basically they're like calling in the reserves.
Exactly. They're bringing back experienced judges to help clear the backlog and ensure people get their day in court.
Okay, but I'm guessing it's not as simple as just picking up the phone and saying, hey, come back. We need you.
You're right about that. The appointment process is actually quite intricate, and it involves a whole chain of actors.
Oh, really? Like who?
Well, it starts with the Chief Justice of the High Court, where the need for ad hoc judges is felt.
Okay, that makes sense.
Then the request goes up to the President of India.
Wow, so it goes all the way to the top.
It does.
Yeah.
And it doesn't stop there. The Chief Minister of the state, the Union Law Minister, the Chief Justice of India, and even the Prime Minister all have a role to play.
That's a lot of people involved. Talk about checks and balances.
Right. It's a complex process. And you know what? That level of complexity makes it a prime target for a prelims question.
Oh, for sure. UPSC loves to throw in those detailed procedural questions.
Absolutely. So understanding the who's who in this appointment process is super important.
Okay, so we've got the High Court Chief Justice, the President, the Chief Minister, the Law Minister, the Chief Justice of India, and the Prime Minister, all involved in this process.
You got it.
Yeah.
And to make things even more interesting, the Supreme Court actually stepped in to clarify this whole appointment procedure in 2021.
Really? What happened?
There was a case called Look Prahari, and in that case, the Supreme Court added another layer to the mix.
Another layer. What do you mean?
They brought in the Supreme Court Collegium.
The collegium. Now, for those of our listeners who might not be super familiar with that term, can you quickly explain what a collegium is in this context?
Sure thing. Basically, the Supreme Court Collegium is a group of the most senior judges in the Supreme Court, and they play a really crucial role in appointing judges to the higher judiciary.
So by bringing in the collegium, the Supreme Court is essentially reinforcing its own role in ensuring a strong and independent judiciary.
Exactly. They're like the guardians of judicial integrity, making sure everything is done by the book.
That makes sense. But they didn't stop at just clarifying the process, did they?
The Supreme Court also laid down some very specific conditions for when Article 224A can actually be used.
Yeah, they did. They set some pretty high bars. It's not like high courts can just appoint ad hoc judges whenever they feel like it.
So what are the conditions? What did the Supreme Court say?
There are two main conditions that have to be met. For a high court to even consider appointing ad hoc judges, first, vacancies must exceed 20% of the sanctioned strength of judges for that court.
20%. So basically they're saying it has to be a pretty serious shortage of judges.
Exactly. And the second condition is that over 10% of the cases pending in that court must be older than 5 years. Wow. So not only do you need a lot of vacancies, but you also need a significant chunk of cases that has been stuck in the system for a long time.
Right. It's like they're saying this is a last resort option, not a quick fix.
Those are pretty strict requirements. What's the reasoning behind setting such a high bar?
Well, I think the Supreme Court is trying to strike a delicate balance.
A balance between
Addressing the immediate need to clear the backlog and preserving the integrity and independence of the judiciary.
So it's like they're saying, yes, we have this tool, but we need to use it carefully and strategically.
Exactly. They don't want ad hoc appointments to become the norm. They want to make sure that the focus remains on appointing more permanent judges and strengthening the judiciary as a whole.
It's like they're saying we need to fix this system, not just patch it up with temporary solutions.
That's a great way to put it. And as part of that strategy, they've also recommended some specific guidelines for how ad hoc appointments should work.
Oh, interesting. So it's not just about meeting those two conditions.
Sure.
There are other rules, too.
Exactly. The Supreme Court wants to make sure that even when ad hoc judges are appointed, it's done in a way that upholds the highest standards of judicial independence and integrity.
Okay, I'm really curious to hear more about these guidelines. What did the Supreme Court recommend?
Well, for starters, they envision creating panels of retired judges who are willing and able to serve on an ad hoc basis.
So kind of like a reserve bench of experienced legal minds.
Exactly. And to maintain that balance between addressing the backlog and upholding judicial independence, the Supreme Court also recommended that these appointments have fixed tenures, maybe 2 to 3 years. They also suggested limiting the number of ad hoc judges per high court to somewhere between 2 and 5.
So it's not just about plugging gaps. It's about doing it strategically with clear guidelines and oversight.
Right. It's a very measured approach. And importantly, they emphasize the need for periodic reviews to assess the effectiveness and necessity of these appointments.
So they're not just going to appoint ad hoc judges and forget about it.
Yeah,
They're going to keep a close eye on how it's working and make adjustments as needed.
exactly. It's all about finding the right balance and making sure that the system works for everyone.
Now, I'm curious, have there actually been any instances where ad hoc judges were appointed?
It's interesting you ask that because despite being part of the Constitution for decades, Article 224A has rarely been invoked. The Supreme Court itself has noted only 3 recorded instances of ad hoc judges being appointed.
Only 3. That's surprising. What were those cases like?
Well, the first instance was way back in 1972 when Justice Surajban was appointed to the Madhya Pradesh High Court for 1 year to specifically handle election petitions.
So it was a very specific need and a limited time frame.
Exactly. Then in 1982, Justice P. Venugopal was appointed to the Madras High Court, and his term was even renewed in 1983 for another year. And finally, in 2007, Justice O.P. Srivastava was appointed to the Allahabad High Court to hear the Ayodhya title suits.
Each case seems quite unique. It highlights the potential flexibility of ad hoc appointments to address specific needs within the judicial system. But I imagine this whole concept of bringing back retired judges isn't without its critics.
You're absolutely right. There's a healthy debate surrounding ad hoc appointments. It's a complex issue with valid arguments on both sides.
So let's unpack those arguments.
Yeah.
What are the main points of contention?
On one side, you have those who champion ad hoc appointments as a pragmatic solution to tackle the backlog and ensure timely justice. They argue that tapping into the experience of retired judges is a win-win. It provides much-needed relief to overburdened courts while utilizing valuable expertise that would otherwise go untapped.
It's like having a seasoned veteran step back onto the field to guide a team through a tough match.
Exactly. But on the other side, there are concerns about the potential impact on judicial independence. Some experts argue that ad hoc judges, even with their vast experience, might be more susceptible to pressure or influence, especially if their tenure depends on the approval of the executive branch.
So it raises questions about the separation of powers and ensuring the judiciary remains impartial.
Precisely. And then there's the argument that relying on ad hoc appointments might distract from addressing the root causes of the problem, the chronic shortage of permanent judges and inadequate court infrastructure. Some experts favor prioritizing the appointment of more permanent judges and investing in better court infrastructure as a more sustainable solution.
It's like using a temporary fix when what you really need is a long-term solution to strengthen the entire system.
That's a great way to put it. Ad hoc appointments could provide temporary relief, but they might not address the systemic issues plaguing the Indian judiciary.
This brings us to a crucial question. Where do things stand now with this whole debate about ad hoc judges?
Well, this is where it gets even more interesting. Recently, the Supreme Court hinted that they might revisit their 2021 decision on ad hoc appointments. They're essentially opening the door to potentially expanding the use of ad hoc judges to help tackle the massive backlog of criminal cases in high courts.
Hold on. So the Supreme Court might be reconsidering its stance. What prompted this shift?
It seems the sheer scale of the problem might be pushing the court to explore more drastic measures. The backlog is immense, and it's impacting people's fundamental right to a fair and speedy trial.
So the question now is, will ad hoc appointments become more common? What are the potential implications?
That's the million-dollar question. If the Supreme Court loosens the restrictions on ad hoc appointments, we could see a significant increase in their use. This could potentially speed up the resolution of cases, but it also raises those concerns about judicial independence we discussed earlier.
It's like walking a tightrope between efficiency and upholding the core principles of the Indian legal system.
Exactly. The Supreme Court has a tough job ahead of them. It's about finding a balance between addressing an urgent need and ensuring the long-term health and integrity of the judiciary.
It sounds like this is an evolving situation that UPSC aspirants should definitely keep an eye on.
Absolutely. Understanding the nuances of ad hoc appointments, the arguments for and against them, and the potential implications of the Supreme Court's evolving stance is crucial for anyone interested in Indian polity and the judiciary.
It's a perfect example of how seemingly obscure legal provisions can suddenly become hot-button issues with real-world consequences. It's a perfect example of how seemingly obscure legal provisions can suddenly become hot-button issues with real-world consequences.
And you know what? For UPSC aspirants, this isn't just some abstract legal concept. This is something that could have real implications for their future roles.
Oh, totally. I mean, imagine you're working in the government and you're asked to weigh in on a proposal to appoint ad hoc judges. You'll need to understand the nuances, the pros and cons, the potential pitfalls.
Exactly. It's about going beyond just memorizing facts and figures. It's about being able to critically analyze different perspectives and form your own informed opinions.
So for all our listeners out there who are gearing up for the UPSC exams, pay close attention. This deep dive into ad hoc judges isn't just an academic exercise.
It's a real-world issue that could one day land on your desk.
And speaking of real-world implications, we've got a thought-provoking question for you to ponder as you continue your studies.
Okay, hit us with it.
Could ad hoc judges be just a temporary fix for a much deeper systemic problem?
That's a good one. It really gets to the heart of the debate.
Right. Because if the root cause is a shortage of permanent judges and inadequate infrastructure, then simply appointing more ad hoc judges might not solve the problem in the long run.
It might just be putting a Band-Aid on a much larger wound.
Exactly. So the question is, are there more sustainable long-term solutions to ensure a robust and efficient judiciary in India?
It's something for all of us to think about, research, and discuss. And for those of you prepping for the UPSC exams, let those insights guide you as you prepare to become the leaders and policymakers of tomorrow.
Absolutely. So keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep pushing the boundaries of your understanding, because that's what's going to set you apart.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
And that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the world of ad hoc judges in India. We hope you found this episode informative and engaging.
Absolutely. And if you did, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and share this episode with your fellow UPSC aspirants.
We'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic too, so feel free to leave a comment below.
And a huge shout out to Live Law, the source of today's insightful information. Their website is a fantastic resource for staying up to date on all things law in India.
Until next time, happy studying, everyone. It's a perfect example of how seemingly obscure legal provisions can suddenly become hot-button issues with real-world consequences. So for all our listeners out there who are gearing up for those UPSC exams, this deep dive into ad hoc judges isn't just an academic exercise. It's a real-world issue that could have implications for your future roles in shaping India's legal landscape.
Absolutely. Whether you're analyzing policy proposals, contributing to legal reforms, or even adjudicating cases one day, a solid understanding of ad hoc appointments and the surrounding debates will be invaluable.
It's a topic that goes beyond just memorizing facts. It's about critically analyzing different perspectives, weighing the pros and cons, and forming your own informed opinions. After all, you might be the ones making decisions that impact the future of India's judiciary.
Exactly. So as you continue your UPSC journey, remember this discussion about Article 224A. It's more than just a constitutional provision. It's a potential solution, a point of contention, and a reflection of the challenges and opportunities facing India's legal system.
And speaking of opportunities, we've got a thought-provoking question for you to ponder as you continue your studies. Could ad hoc judges be a temporary fix for a systemic problem?
Oh, that's a good one.
Or are there more sustainable long-term solutions to ensure a robust and efficient judiciary in India? It's something to think about, research, and let those insights guide you on your path to becoming exceptional civil servants.
It's a complex issue with no easy answers, but that's what makes it so fascinating and relevant. Keep exploring, keep learning, and keep pushing the boundaries of your understanding.
And that wraps up our deep dive into the world of ad hoc judges in India. We hope you found this episode informative and engaging. If you did, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and share this episode with your fellow UPSC aspirants.
And a huge shout out to Live Law, the source of today's insightful information. They're a fantastic resource for staying up to date on legal developments in India.
Until next time, happy studying, everyone.